trying to get on this Bellator MMA card in April with my boy Yancy Medeiros in Hawaii. What's up with Bellator MMA? And with that, welcome to Early Stoppage, a show where the news of the day is usually given just enough time, but sometimes not enough. This is your first time stopping by. We thank you. And you're ready for something you won't find anywhere else. I'm John Franklin. I'm joined by the God, father of Fight Night Picks, Craig Allen. Craig, how are you?
John who? Franklin? Is that
Franklin.
like Benjamin? Okay.
Yeah. So nice to meet you.
Is there much for a wind around your place these days? Can you hold a kite up there?
Last night there was.
There was. It's been a long time, John Franklin. You know,
Yes.
Early Stoppage, we're into the 50s, 60s in terms of the amount of episodes that we've done in the past. And listen, I'm looking forward to it. We missed out on a ton of MMA and combat sports. I mean, hell, John, we're on a Friday night when we're taping this. There's PFL Challenger Series. Like, there's all sorts of stuff going on. KSW's got a big card tomorrow. The UFC's back in London. We get so much to talk about. So, John, we start here. Apparently, I wasted like 60, 70 bucks a couple of years ago, and it doesn't matter anymore. And my Cleveland Browns, they picked up a guy who's not so hot in the streets these days. But, yeah, new direction for the franchise. We're going to see how that one plays out.
Well, he's looking good criminally. We'll see how the civil stuff works out. So real quick, where do you think Baker ends up? Is he going to Houston?
He wants to go to Indianapolis. They need a quarterback.
Oh, yeah, he'd fit right in Indianapolis.
Yep.
On this episode of Early Stoppage, we talk Paul in the UFC, Hardy out of the UFC, and the women's GOAT fight, ? We begin, Craig, with Colby Covington. Colby Covington got his hand raised a few weekends ago in Las Vegas in his fight with Jorge Masvidal, a fight he mostly controlled despite getting at one point sat down briefly. In the aftermath of the fight, Covington finds himself in John Fitch territory, being better than everyone in the division except the champ, a fact that led friend of the show, ? Chael Sonnen to suggest that the next challenge for Covington is 185 pounds and Israel Adesanya. Now, this makes a career that is already very Chael-ish, even more Chael-ish, but that doesn't necessarily make Chael wrong. Craig, Chael said 185. What does Craig Allen say for Colby Covington?
I mean, why not, right? We saw that Israel Adesanya's kryptonite can be the wrestling, but really it's up at 205 pounds, I would think, right? Because we saw Jan Blachowicz have so much success, but you look at everybody else that Adesanya's fought at 185, whether it's Robert Whittaker or Marvin Vettori, or we can just continue to name guys. It seems like he doesn't really have that issue defending takedowns at 185. And it also seems like your next likely challenger, and I know we're going to talk about the different divisions, but when we do look at it, Jared Cannonier is your next title challenger. And I'm cool with it. Jared Cannonier looked pretty darn good against Derek Brunson not that long ago. So it's a deserved, and it's a bit of a shakeup at the top of the middleweight division. But when I look at it for Colby Covington, yeah, do you want to be the bridesmaid every single time out? I mean, what the hell do they do with him? Do they match him up with like Vicente Luque or like the winner of Takashi Sato and Gunnar Nelson this weekend? Like, I don't really know where he fits in at 170. So you set it up perfectly. I mean, Chael Sonnen had his title shots, so on and so forth. Ended up at the end of his career with a promotion that we already mentioned, a promotion that Nate Diaz wants to flirt with a little bit with Bellator. So maybe for Colby Covington, I'm sure the money's quite good over with the UFC, but it really is tough to matchmake at this point. So a move up to 185, I don't know. He'd have to pack on a lot of muscle to move up there, wouldn't you think?
You would think, and I think where it gets interesting, one of the things I love about this show, which is why it's missing in the MMA space and we don't do it, is that you do the in the cage stuff and I kind of do the out of cage stuff. And I think that, Chael had Anderson, and Anderson became, not only was Anderson a great foil for Chael was a great foil for Anderson. I mean, Anderson kind of didn't have that leading up. He was like this guy, he was an Ali without a Frazier. And I think Israel Adesanya is kind of an Ali without a Frazier right now. He doesn't have that one guy that sort of is pushing him. And even if he can't quite get there, we still care about the fight. So you could argue that he's kind of, Kamaru Usman's Frazier. But I think that if he goes up a weight class, I think that he could handle it. Chael did it. That's probably why Chael's suggesting it. I've seen recently that now Colby's kind of co-signing on it. Listen, once you lose to the champ, you have two choices. You can either be the guy that fights prospects and goes on their resume, or you can cross your fingers that the champ loses and there's a new champ to fight. So that's kind of where he's at.
Well, I mean, I can see some counters to the arguments, but for everybody out there that's listening, watching, so on and so forth, A, we thank you. But B, when you look at it for Adesanya, he kind of met his match with Robert Whittaker, but he's 2-0 over Whittaker. And for Kamaru Usman, he kind of met his match against Colby Covington. He's 2-0 over Covington, and Masvidal is a far away second, and he's already 2-0 against him. So, yeah, I'm cool with it. I think it wouldn't be too bad. And I mean, you look at that and you want to parlay it forward, and we've got a lot of conversation. Whoa.
Hold on. Before we move on, didn't Whittaker fight at lower weight?
Yeah, he used to fight at 170.
So how much would you hate them switching divisions? Covington goes to 85, Whittaker goes to 70. Both of them get title shots. Would you hate that?
I don't think he can do 70. I mean, even coming up this weekend, we've got a co-main event of Dan Hooker taking on Arnold Allen. And it was kind of revealed after Dan Hooker made the cut. I don't know if you saw the pictures. The guy was shred city at 185. But his coach, nutritionist, kind of had to say, you know, this wasn't Dan taking 6 weeks to cut to 145. This was preparations over 6 months to make sure that he could make the cut safely, healthily. But you look at it for Whittaker, I just don't know if that's the play at 170. You hate to see a guy that's super depleted, and I think Whittaker makes sense at 185.
There you go.
So we talk about all these divisions, John. And this week, other than awkward cut and paste jobs that I saw on TikTok and Reddit, Dana White was making his rounds, and he stopped by the Impulsive podcast with Logan Paul. Dana and Logan discussed Logan going to the UFC potentially, which we'll get to later, but they discussed the fight between Conor McGregor and Jake Paul, to which Dana said they don't say no to anything anymore. I mean, listen, they didn't say no to CM Punk and Mike Jackson. So there's that. They also didn't say no to Mike Jackson, Dean Barry, so look into that one. But there's also been a rumor that Kamaru Usman and Canelo Alvarez will fight. So, John, Dana has to sign off on both. So which do you think he is more likely to sign off on?
You know, I just can't wrap my head around this because Jake Paul, I just feel like Conor is getting into Paulville. Like he's starting to get into that space where fighting Jake Paul makes more sense because he can't really find the right dance partner at in the UFC. But here's the thing. I think that it would be so much of a given that Kamaru Usman would lose to Canelo Alvarez in a boxing ring that I think that the UFC and Kamaru Usman gain more just by fighting Alvarez. And I don't think it takes anything away from who he is as a UFC fighter in the same way it didn't take anything away from Conor when he lost to Floyd. I think that if I'm Dana, I would sign off on the Usman thing because if he looks okay, then it raises his stock tremendously. If he went 10 rounds with Alvarez, like Conor went with Floyd, man, it would really raise his profile. And I think if Dana was going to sign off on one or the other, I think he would prefer to get Jake Paul in an octagon. But I think the likelihood, I think there's a more upside with the Canelo Alvarez Kamaru Usman fight.
Jake Paul, Logan Paul, UFC, Conor McGregor. I'm not saying no. Kamaru Usman wants Canelo Alvarez. Canelo in all the interviews. I'm not saying no. Like all these guys not really shutting the door. And I think from a business perspective, obviously it's a smart move, but I agree with you on this one. I really do. I mean, I sound like Matt Allen. I really do. He always says that and it bugs me. But when I do look at this one for Canelo, risk reward, you've beaten everybody. You've beaten everybody not named Floyd Mayweather. You've really pounded out a great legacy on the canvas. And I think a fight with Kamaru, it's bigger than some of the mandatory challengers. It's bigger than some of the fights that he's had. I mean, look at it recently, some of the guys that Canelo's fought. Would I love another fight against like a Crusher Kovalev? I'd be down for that. Crusher's my guy. But when I look at it, I think a fight against Kamaru, it really does build up the UFC. It could also be a nice payday for Canelo. Those real kind of cross promotion fights, they seem to do quite well. We saw what happened for Conor and Floyd. So yeah, I'm cool with it. And I think Dana would be more likely to sign off on that one. And then somewhere in like the Quebec adjacent regions, George St. Pierre's there, like cursing the skies. He must be so upset.
I know. I'm with you. Craig, we move on. Craig, I'm going to try and do this next segment without crying, but the day has come. Greg Hardy has been cut, or more specifically, not re-signed by the UFC. Hardy was a controversial figure throughout his time in the UFC. So now that it appears to have ended, the question is, was there any point to his time in the UFC?
We kind of touched on this when it came to the preview for the Sergey Spivak fight. And a lot of people said, right? Like Greg Hardy was able to rock Tai Tuivasa, a guy we're going to talk about later on in the show. But when it comes to what Greg Hardy was able to do in the octagon, he was so good, powerful at the start of his career. I mean, you look at it, 3-0 as an amateur, first round knockouts, 32 seconds, a minute 36, 14 seconds, comes into MMA, fights on Contender Series, his first pro fight, and knocks out Austin Lane in 57 seconds. He reappears on Contender Series, knocks out Tabaris Gordon, 17 seconds, beats Rasheem Jones with Extreme Fight Night in 53 seconds. So then, he's 3-0, comes into the UFC, and has that DQ against Alan Crowder. But think about that card, because that was UFC on ESPN +1. That was a giant card. That was Cejudo and Dillashaw in the main event. They really, really tried to load that one up. That was a big opportunity for Greg Hardy, and he was in a co-main event slot before a title fight. Like, you remember the first, the first Fox card? Wasn't that JDS and Cain Velasquez for the title?
Yeah.
Like that was big stuff, right? At the time.
Fight, yeah.
So that was also a big card. Then he fights Dmitry Smolyakov, the worst fighter in UFC history. That was a co-main event slot. He wins that fight. Then he fights Juan Adams, beats him. That was on a main card. Then he fights Ben Sassoli, main card. Now these are all, fight nights. Then he fights Alexander Volkov, co-main event. Didn't look terrible by some accounts. Then he's on UFC 249, a main card. He's on a fight night main card. He's on a fight night main card. He's on UFC 264 main card. And then UFC 272 main card. My question is, what type of fans are you going to attract with Greg Hardy? Because realistically, his run in the UFC was less than stellar. I mean, he was on a 3-fight losing streak at the end. He got finished in all 3 of those fights. To me, it was, what do football fans do on Saturday nights? Really? Like, what are you going to be watching? Basketball? So I feel like it was still like we're trying to reel in some casual football fans. We're trying to make an ESPN association. But at the end, I just didn't know what it was. And for me, Greg Hardy didn't have much of a ground game, so it was pretty easy to pick Sergey Spivak. But I don't know what the whole fascination was with Greg Hardy. I mean, he must have drawn in eyeballs. He must have made some money for the promotion, but I didn't really get the whole Greg Hardy experiment. And I assume that there's going to be the bare knuckles of the world that are going to line up to sign him.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like, and we'll get to that a little later as well, that seems like a given that he's going to be a bare knuckle fighter, or, I mean, he'd be a big deal in bare knuckle, actually. But I'm with you. I think that, he had a name. He had, for better or worse, whether it was famous or infamous, you knew who Greg Hardy was. So, yeah, he's going to bring in some casuals. He's gonna, like you said, cross over, and he was enough of a prospect. I mean, there are guys, especially in the heavyweight division, there are guys who are nowhere near as compelling as prospect fighters, whether it be physically, whatever, as Greg Hardy was. Even if we didn't know who he was, he's still, just in terms of his physical stature, if he wasn't a guy who had been suspended by the NFL, if he was a CFL football player, or if he was a guy with like the history.
Whoa! Stop the slander! Don't talk ill of the CFL here. We won't have that.
I'm just saying, in terms of being known, if he was XFL, if he was a lesser known guy, still with that same physical makeup, he still might have been interesting. But I do think that things played out the way they were meant to play out. He's not the kind of guy that in your promotion you necessarily want to hold a belt or represent you. But you gave him a shot. You got some casual fans. It didn't work out. Here we are.
What do you make of the nickname? Like, there's some nicknames in MMA, and we talked about this in the last couple of weeks. And you know what? It really sucks because we had like a whole lead into this week's previews and predictions where we had names on a dartboard because Nathaniel Wood's nickname's the prospect. And then we threw a dart, and whatever you hit, that has to be his nickname. So I got London Lighthouse. Matt got British Bruiser. But when it comes to Greg Hardy, he was definitely sitting in a room going, you know what? Prince of War. That's badass. It's like Maria Agapova a couple weeks ago, Demon Slayer. Like, you have to call me Demon Slayer. Where do people come up with these stupid nicknames?
I don't know. So it comes off a little bit vibes of like you're trolling Bruce. Like, I'm sure Bruce Buffer looks at that card and goes, like, rolls his eyes. Like, I gotta call a grown woman Demon Slayer. I gotta call this guy Prince of War. Like, some of them it's okay, but some of them, I wonder if let me ask you a question. Would you ever be opposed to just getting rid of all of them, or do you think that they're a nice part of the sport?
Nicknames?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like Josh Copeland's the Cuddle Bear. Like, there's just some that like don't make much. Like, again, Rashad Coulter is my most unfavorite. The Daywalker. Like, how do you end up with Daywalker? Is that from like a show?
Right. Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. But you know what, John? We'll move on because Kayla Harrison is back with the PFL. And I know that the people of Reddit love the Kayla Harrison talk. They love the PFL talk. And now her in the PFL, they're talking about their openness to book a co-promoted fight with Chris Cyborg to finally settle once and for all who is the best female mixed martial artist, especially at 145 pounds, let alone 155. You know, if you believe that Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko don't exist. So, John, you're tight with the Bellator brass. Do you think that they go for a co-promoted fight with Harrison and Cyborg?
I think that Bellator goes with a co-promoted fight with these two because Bellator likes to do crazy shit. And, even before, more so, what's funny? Bellator kind of now is like your wild friend who, and I know this because I used to be this guy, who in their 20s used to get all shithoused and do crazy shit, and now is like a school teacher in his 40s. Like, I'm a lot like Bell. And you look at Bellator now, they're like having normal guys and divisions and rankings, and I'm like, what are you guys all settled down now? You don't want to let two 50-year-olds fight? You're done letting a backyard brawler fight? Those days are gone. Like, who do you guys think you are? You chilled out? You want to get them to go back to Vegas and rip it up a couple more times. Yeah, at first I thought they would do it to kind of, curry some favor with Kayla Harrison and maybe down the road they could sign her, but they could have signed her recently. So what is co-promoting going to help?
They tried, but there was a matching clause. So the PFL got to match the Bellator offer, which is crazy because I wonder, like in MMA, you kind of go around blind. Like Freddie Freeman gets his heart broken by the Braves. Anthopoulos doesn't call him. So then he's forced to sign with the hometown Dodgers. He's emotional. It's crazy. But you know what the best part of it is, John?
Tell me.
We know exactly the terms of the deal. We know exactly how much money he's making. With all these MMA deals, you're kind of left guessing. Remember when Adesanya just signed his big deal before he fought Whitaker? And Jorge Masvidal signed a big deal. And these are the biggest deals in MMA. But are they? We don't know. There could be somebody in the middle of Australia fighting for a regional promotion that you've never heard of that's getting paid boatloads of cash. Like, how do you know that these are the biggest deals out there? We just don't. But when it comes to Kayla Harrison, ultimately she signs a good ticket. I would assume, obviously, Bellator is going to pay her a high number per fight. They're not going to pay her $1 million bonus. So she's able to get a high number per fight, plus $1 million bonus, plus a fight with Chris Cyborg. I think Bellator would look at it and say, you know what? This is an opportunity for us. We're already associated with Viacom. We're already on the different networks in the States. Up here in Canada, they don't have a TV deal, so it's all free on YouTube. But when it comes to that, if they could co-promote and end up on an ESPN, ESPN2, I mean, what's the harm in that? It's more brand exposure for Bellator. And I don't know, chances are if you're watching the PFL, you're probably watching Bellator too. So I don't know how many people are going to, what kind of an audience it's going to attract. But ultimately, you have to think they're going to try and get some of those UFC fans. And I'm reading, John, from a PFL, press release that I have in my email First line at the bottom about Professional Fighters League. Professional Fighters League, PFL, is the fastest growing and most innovative sports league. PFL is the #2 MMA company worldwide and the only with a sports season format where individual fighters compete in regular season playoffs and championships. Guys, we're #2. We're #2. One championship, Bellator, PFL, Combate. They all say that they're #2. I don't know who is, but I think if you co-promote, you're only going to help that cause. So I'm all for it. I'm cool with it. But John, like, what's that old saying? Shoot for the moon. They have those in the classroom posters.
Yeah, they do. Even if you don't get it, you'll still get the stars.
Exactly.
I get it, but and you unlock something here that is interesting to me. If you're Bellator, would you rather be on ESPN? Would you rather co-promote? And it's kind of like back in the day when UFC sent Chuck Liddell to fight in Pride, and Vanderlei Silva never came back. So Chuck Liddell goes over to Pride. He fights. Is there value? Is it kind of like, does this turn into WWE where there's some value in being on the other person's airwaves? Like if Chris Cyborg beats the hell out of Kayla Harrison on ESPN, isn't that more valuable than her beating Kayla Harrison on Bellator TV, or is it a wash?
I think it's bigger if you do it on ESPN. I mean, when you look at it for combat sports, Showtime's big, but like ESPN's ESPN. Even a Canadian can realize that.
Right. And if you play it right, if you say to them, yes, we'll co-promote, but it has to be on ESPN and it has to be on big ESPN. Well, now here's what's changed. If Cyborg knocks her out, it's on in bars and restaurants and Applebee's, and it's on now it's everywhere, and it's on Sports Center, and it's like if Chris Cyborg knocks out Kayla Harrison on Showtime, it doesn't make Sports Center. If she knocks her out on ESPN, it does. So I think that's the value to Bellator.
Let's make it happen.
Let's do it, and we move on. Craig, we talked about this before. It's maybe time to revisit it. We'll get to the divisions later. I'd love to see where you have this light heavyweight division ranked. I looked at it, and it was slim pickings. And so what are we doing? What's next for Glover? I mean, he's one of those guys that, this used to happen back in the day. It doesn't happen as much anymore. But maybe it does. Maybe I'm just not paying attention. Back in the day, it would be like a guy would wait forever, or a gal would wait forever to get a title. And as soon as they got it, now it's like, I'm going to get all those surgeries I had been putting off, and I'm going to spend some time with my family. And it sort of takes forever to get the guy back in the cage, or girl. I feel like, but I can't prove, I feel like Miesha Tate did this when she won.
Jermaine Durandamy did it, and they stripped her.
I got it, and I'm just going to enjoy people calling me champ for a while. So what's next for Glover? Should they just give Bones $20 million a fight to save this mess? Or can we make something out of this? Can we make chicken salad out of chicken shit? Rest in peace, Brock Lesnar. He's still alive, but you know what I mean. His career's dead.
So I wrote in the comments, like, it seems like everybody on Twitter wants to see Tai Tuivasa fight John Jones for the interim heavyweight championship, because that seems to be the way that Dana White wants to go with it. Stipe, is he a full-time firefighter? Because it seems like that out of the video that I watched. And I think we even talked about that in the last episode, Early Stoppage, whenever that one was. But when it comes to this division, John, I mean, you have Yuri Prochazka. He's young. He's exciting. He's there to bang. And he's been training at a gym headlined by Santino DeFranco at Fight Ready. So I think Yuri's going to win that fight. I really do. Now I do sound like Matt Allen. Who am I? What is this?
What Allen are you?
I think Yuri's going to win. I think he's going to be a champ for a while. And he's one of those like oddball guys that can sell a fight. So I'm down for it. I know I didn't necessarily answer it the right way, but I see that fight ending. That's going to be it for Glover. And kind of the silver lining in all of it, we saw Sabina Mazo lose her last fight to Miranda Maverick. It was going to happen, right? But she was training out of Teixeira MMA and Fitness, and she gave so much credit to that gym. Alex Pereira just came out, beat my guy, Bruno Silva, just the other week. Like, we've seen all these fighters recently coming out of Teixeira MMA and Fitness having success. I think Glover is a coach, really headlining a big camp at a Danbury, Connecticut. I think that's the way to go for him.
Yeah, listen, let me start at one thing that you mentioned just to dispel that quickly. And this is not me fat shaming, okay? I don't want to see Tai Tuivasa fight for the interim champion of shoey drinking. Like, I'm not interested in that guy fighting for a big fight any more than I was interested in Mark Hunt. There's certain
Yeah,
guys
yeah, but he
I
just
just
beat Derek Lewis. He was an underdog.
I get it, and I respect these guys as fighters, but I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. I just don't look at these bangers as champions. I just don't. That's not the vibe they put off. If you go in there and swing for the bleachers, that to me doesn't make you a champion necessarily. It makes you now. If you win, I can't argue with winning. Okay, I'm sorry. So yes, if you beat Derek Lewis, you cannot argue with wins and losses. I just don't get. I'm gonna say this, man, with all due respect to Tai Tuivasa. I love the kid's heart. He goes in there and he really lays it on the line. He does not deserve to be in an octagon with John Jones. There you go. I said it. So that's just how I feel. So I think that at this point in John Jones' career, he's wasted enough time. No more bullshit fights. You're getting in there only with guys who are Hall of Famers or with gold belts wrapped around their waist. That's it. That no more bullshit fights. No more. This guy's on a good streak. All due respect to Dominic Reyes, those guys are gone. The Dominic Reyes of the world, and to be honest, when I look at this light heavyweight rankings, all I see is Dominic Reyes. So I think it's time for Jones to go to heavyweight. And I don't know what to tell Glover. I mean, I really don't know what to do here.
I don't have anything for you. I think Yuri wins the fight. But, John, we'll move on and we'll make our way to welterweight. And there is talk that Dustin Poirier is either looking at the weight class, but not to fight Colby Covington. He's made that very clear, but maybe to chase big things like a title. His coach, Mike Brown, has come out and said that he would be better at welterweight than lightweight. John, your thoughts? Is like a Diego Sanchez-esque move from featherweight to lightweight to welterweight to play. And then back to super lightweight to have a competitive fight with Kevin Lee and make me sweat at like a minus 1,100 that I had on my ticket.
I don't know what the play is for this kid anymore because, you and I brought something up. And, it's funny. We talk about algorithms, YouTube algorithms. In my house, the YouTube algorithm, because it goes through our TV, it all depends on who's watching the most YouTube. So if my daughter's watching a lot of YouTube, it's Peppa Pig. If my son's watching it, it's, whatever Roblox star or whatever baseball highlights. If I'm watching it, it's Champ.
Anthony Rizzo going back to the Yankees. How does he feel about that?
He doesn't like it. He's a Cubs fan. So, although, you know what? He went to a game today with his grandmother at the Guardians against, who'd they play today? They won. But he might mess around and become a Guardians fan. All these damn Cubs are leaving. Anyway, the point that I'm making here is that I think that I don't really know what to do with Poirier. The reason I brought up Chael is because Chael had said that that he thinks Poirier could potentially make his way up to welterweight, and there might be something there. And I just, what Chael had said was he said that in one of his videos he talked about super fights, and you and I had talked a long time ago about they should bring back the super fight, give it a belt. That's what BMF should have been. I guess Chael must have mentioned that in one of his videos. Maybe he's watching our show. Maybe it's his own thought. But my point is that that's where I feel like Poirier's at now. He is what Dan Henderson was. He was what Muhammad Lawal was. He's what Nate Diaz is. He's what Jorge Masvidal is. He's what Conor McGregor is. He is a money weight fighter. He will weigh in at the weight it takes to weigh in at to make the most money. That's why you got 45, you got 55, you got 70. Fine. Maybe the 70 is so he can fight Diaz. Maybe the 70 is so he can fight. I think he's friends with Masvidal. I thought he was friends with Usman. So that's the case. If he's friends with Masvidal and he's friends with Usman and he doesn't want to fight Covington, what the hell are you doing at 70? That's all the money right there. All the money at 70 is those three guys.
Like, do you fight Conor McGregor? Because, I mean, so I'm on an article right now. McGregor wants to fight Usman for title in return. 6 hours ago, Brett Okamoto. And in this article, third paragraph down, and I swear to God, Brett Okamoto wrote this. And I mean this, as nice as possible. McGregor of Dublin, Ireland, said he could return as soon as late summer and wants to challenge defending welterweight champion Kamaru Usman, 20-1. Brett, we know where the fuck he's from. Why would you put that in there? Dublin, Ireland. Come on. And I feel confident against Usman. A jab-happy, sloppy, orthodox wrestler with no submissions whatsoever. What's he going to do? Where's the danger here? I don't see danger. No one has ever obtained 3 titles in 3 divisions. Myself versus Usman for the 170-pound title. My comeback fight is the one I'm eyeballing at the minute. McGregor, in an interview released on his YouTube channel, MacLife. Like, we don't need to make that fight. And for Dustin Poirier, his last fight was against Oliveira, and he lost that fight. And so be it, whatever. But you look at his record. McGregor, Hooker, wins. Great wins. Lost to Habib, Holloway, Alvarez, Gaethje, Pettis, Alvarez, Miller, Michael Johnson. And that was back in 2016. Like, Dustin Poirier's fought the best of the best. And like you said, Dan Henderson reached to the top, and then he'd lose one, and then he'd win some more, and then he'd lose one. Like, I think the Dan Henderson comp is fair. Hopefully, Dustin Poirier does not fight as long as Dan Henderson fought, because he fought for way too long, even though he might have beat Michael Bisping in that title fight. He might have. I don't know. But yeah, for me, I think you look at that division, and there's a little bit of a logjam up at the top. It's a lot of recycled names. That will feature heavily in where I rate the division when that comes up soon. So for me, I think a fight against Diaz, it's been long rumored. I think that's got to be the one.
You think Dustin Poirier is a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. Yep. What was that show he was on? Was it Fightville? Matt knows these things.
It was. He's one of those rare guys that ended up, they talked about who, I can't remember who the 2 people they were comparing, that they were famous from when they were young and they handled it well. One was LeBron James, and I can't remember. Oh, Leonardo DiCaprio. They've been famous forever, and they've handled it well. Poirier is kind of in that same situation. I mean, he's been in the public eye much longer than he's been a fighter, really. I mean, he was really young when Fightville came out. So he's been in the consciousness of fighters forever. And if you look back at all the guys, even some of the tough guys, I mean, they've all had their wackiness and been up and down. So, and we move on to sparring sessions, Craig. This week, we return to a question we've asked before. Khamzat Chimaev is back in the headlines. We'll get to the whole Darren Till, Conor McGregor of it all later. But his name came up this week as someone who could potentially solidify Kamaru Usman's legacy, meaning if Usman defended the title again and then beat Khamzat Chimaev, then he would surpass George St. Pierre as the greatest welterweight of all time. Others have criticized his resume. So, Craig, I ask you, is Khamzat Chimaev a generational fighter or a can crusher?
I still think he's a generational fighter. You look at it, he's 10-0. And I mean, consider the guys that he beat. So maybe, you look at John Phillips and you go, okay, well, John Phillips wasn't that great at middleweight. And that's true. He wasn't. He beat Reese McKee, but Reese McKee was kind of like, I like Reese McKee a lot. Skeletor, I think he's great. He just put out a tweet today on Friday that he's looking to fight Northern Ireland with Cage Warriors coming up soon. So I'm excited about that one. But Reese was kind of in over his head in that fight. He beats Gerald Mearshart. That's a credible win. Beats Li Jingliang easily. And when you watch that fight and you kind of consider everything for what it's worth, like we look at Islam Makhachev and what he's done since he's come back and he's been active, the way that he beats a short notice Bobby Green, the way that he beats Dan Hooker, the way that he beats these guys, it's quick, it's easy, and it impresses the hell out of you. The way that Chimaev was able to handle Li Jingliang, it was like, okay, Li's a good fighter. If you can beat him that fast and that way, you're onto something. So the same way that I look at Islam Makhachev and I think, man, this guy, future champ, I'm on board with that one. The way that I look at Khamzat Chimaev, and you consider the guys that he beat on the way up, Mzwandile Halongwa, a guy who has a wild knockout with EFC, like one of those Sports Center ready type of knockouts, if you go back through his career, to beat him in the second round by submission, to beat Ikram Aliaskerov, who, if I'm not mistaken, he just fought on the Eagle FC card. He just beat Nishan Burl on that last Eagle FC card. Like, he has some credible wins as a pro before the UFC, but the way that he's doing these things, I don't think he's a can crusher. I do think he's a generational fighter. Now, only time will tell, because if you look at that division, if you look at strength of schedule and who he's going to fight next, he's fighting Gilbert Burns. That's not an easy fight. It really isn't. So I think once he beats, or if he beats Gilbert Burns, that will tell, okay, if he beats him, and especially the way that he's able to do it, that's really going to answer that question. But for me, I'm on board with generational fighter. I really am. Like, we don't often see fighters just whoop. Like, again, his buddy now, the guy who he's always got his arm around, Darren Till, he was able to have it felt like a quick rise through the division, and it was a quick rise. But I think Chimaev has a few more tricks in his bag than Till did.
Well, Chimaev came out this week and comparing himself to John Jones, he said, we're similar, except I didn't take punches like John did. When John was early in his career, he took punches. It's one of those things where if the bar keeps getting raised and you keep jumping over it, it's like, I remember when you and I had a conversation very early about Chimaev. And one of the things that I said was, what could he have done better than he's done? And the answer was not much. So even if you're going to question his strength of schedule, it's like saying Alabama plays nobody. Okay, well, the teams they played, they destroyed. So, yeah, they're playing a team that's not ranked, but they're beating them by 60. That's what you should do if you play a team that's not ranked. He is, in effect, beating these guys he's fighting by 60. So, as the bar, you're right. Gilbert Burns is the litmus test. If he goes in there and does what he's done to these other guys, to Gilbert Burns, like what he's done to these other guys, first of all, I don't want to go too far in saying how surprised that would make me. I don't want to go Davidson Baker. I'll shave my head into male pattern baldness if Khamzat Chimaev beats Gilbert Burns like he beat these other guys, because I like my hair just the way it is. But I would be pretty damn surprised by that.
Yeah, that's it. Like, we've had prospects here recently, like Javid Bashrat that fought Trevin Jones, and Matt and I really were critical of his record. And we picked Trevin Jones, but we gave, the flowers to Javid Bashrat. He's an impressive fighter. He comes in, fights an impressive fight. He ate a lot of hard shots. We learned a lot more about Javid Bashrat. Do I think he's going to be a champion in the next 2 years? Not necessarily. AJ Fletcher came in, fought Matt Semmelsberger, had a hell of a fight. Good for him. But the talent that he fought outside of the UFC was bad. It was bad. And you could tell that there's definitely some things that he needs to kind of iron out. With Chimaev, like, it's been a hot knife through butter. And apparently here recently, I said a knife through hot butter, which is oil. So that's something that I actually said in real life, in a video. But yeah, I'm all for it. And John, you would assume too, if Chimaev can beat Burns, you can beat Luque, you can beat Muhammad, you can beat maybe even Leon Edwards. Like, you can beat everybody that's not Usman. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah.
So
particularly since, if I remember correctly, I mean, and I definitely don't remember correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Burns and Usman wasn't that bad of a fight. I mean, it was Usman's fight, but it wasn't like Burns was just getting, it wasn't like
him once.
It wasn't like Usman was in a Ferrari and Burns was in a Ford. I mean, they were neck and neck, right? So
yeah,
I guess that's what I'm kind of saying. So yeah, this is going to tell us a lot. And I think that's why the UFC's putting him in there. All right, Craig, time has come. Let's move on to our featured segment, ranking the divisions. Maybe we'll make this a multiple part TikTok. You rank them. You tell me whatever you want to tell me about them. And, give me your little summary as to why you have them ranked the way you do.
Every single week with Fight Night Picks, I say that middleweight is the worst division. But it's not. It's not. I'll admit it, like Drake said. Light heavyweight is the worst division in men's MMA right now. I mean, listen, your champion, Glover Teixeira in the UFC. Yikes. You've got Vadim Nemkov, generational talent, some may say. Beast in 25-8 is his adversary. So we got to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Yuri Prochazka is great. We do have some good up-and-comers. Alexander Rakic, I don't know if he's necessarily lived up to the hype that we had for him coming into the UFC. But when I look at light heavyweight, and I brought it up on Fight Matrix so I could have kind of all of the divisions up in front, 205 is probably not the best one up there. Glover, Jan Blachowicz, both guys late in their career. Phil Davis, late in his career. Corey Anderson. Magomed Ankalaev's not winning any, fans the way that he's fought lately. Melvin Manhoff, Yoel Romero, Thiago Santos. MMA can be a young man's game. Light heavyweight is not. Do you think that's fair having them that far down there?
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I mean, I think that if you add in the Bellator fighters, it raises it a little bit. But if you split those promotions and you do it the way they actually are constructed, I mean, it's thin, it's lean.
So the next one is then middleweight. And I mean, Israel Adesanya, again, now I'm joking, but really, when we talk generational talent, he is a generational talent. He's a great champion, but nobody's been able to really test him other than Jan up a weight class. So then after that, you got Whitaker, Cannonier, Gegard's your champ over with Bellator. He's still doing the damn thing, but beating Austin Vanderford, it was impressive the way that he did it, but still, Vittori, Brunson, Strickland, Hermanson, Darren Till, Gastelum, Machida, Muniz, Weidman, Masterdine, Imavov. Like, we do have some good prospects. Obviously, Muniz is an older guy, but he's a hell of a prospect. Imavov is my guy. I get excited about an Imavov fight. But even after that, Uriah Hall, Brad Tavares, Roberto Soldic, who I love, but he's got to fight with a Bellator or UFC to really prove it. So for me, middleweight's one of those ones. We haven't really seen any hot prospects lately. And I would have it there. And you could interchange that with my next one. So I don't know if you have middleweight that far down, but I do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you so far completely.
All right, so the next one's heavyweight. I mean, when you look at heavyweight right now, yes, we have Chris Daukaus taking on Curtis Blades. That's a fun fight. We have had Tom Aspinall move up the ranks, and I love Aspinall, and I love Ciryl Gane. But Francis Ngannou, not a young guy. He's out for a long time with, knee surgery that he's going to have coming up. Stipe Miocic is on Fight Matrix, your second-ranked guy, full-time firefighter. He hasn't fought in a very long time. Blades, Tuivasa, Volkov, Lewis, Rosenstrike, Ryan Bader, Overeem, who hasn't fought in forever, 2021, Verdum, Tybura, Chekongo, Moldavsky. Like, we do have some prospects, but when we're talking like a top 20 ranking, and we're in 2022, and Fedor Emelianenko beating Tim Johnson is considered a top 20 fighter at heavyweight, it's not that good.
An active John Jones in heavyweight or light heavyweight, how does it affect your rankings? How much further up would you be willing to put either one of those divisions if they get a full-time Jones?
Maybe light heavyweight kind of then springboards themselves into, what would that be? Into ranking number 6. And it goes past middleweight and it goes past heavyweight. But these three divisions are definitely like head and shoulders below everybody else. Like foot and knee below everybody else.
Feet and ankles below. Yeah, I'm with you. I just think that, Dana has always struggled, in my opinion, with keeping heavyweight boxer or heavyweight fighters busy. He's like, pull Brock in here and there. I'll pull this guy. He just can never get them in exactly the frequency that he wants. And, we've been toying with Jones forever. Like, I've never seen a guy waste more of his prime for what? Now, maybe that might extend his prime. Who knows? Maybe he bought himself a couple years screwing around. But, I mean, are they prime years? So now he fights until he's 38 or 39 or 40, as opposed to fighting more in his prime? I don't know. Is that better or worse? Who knows?
I don't know. And his brother's just getting the bag with the Raiders.
I know, right? Which means that what about John Jones? Ended up being at the Performance Institute. That'd be crazy. Or Extreme Couture. All right, go ahead.
All right, so now we're starting to get into the thick of it. So we still have, what do we have? We have flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, welterweight. Welterweight I have at number 5. And if you look at it, we already kind of touched on it. I mean, your champion's already beaten Covington twice. He's already beaten Masvidal twice. We have Chimaev making moves, starting grooves, and then you consider everybody else. Gilbert Burns, Luque, Muhammad, Leon Edwards, Sean Brady on the come up. And then when we look outside of the promotion, Yaroslav Amasov, and hopefully he's doing well right now over in Ukraine. He's got a fight against MVP that's booked for May. We'll see if that one happens, but he definitely has, bigger things to focus on right now. But Chiesa, Magny, Ray Cooper III over with PFL, Wonderboy, Michael Page, MVP, Jason Jackson, Douglas Lima still doing it. Kevin Holland making the move to 170. Nate Diaz, Muslim Salikov. Like, I continue to go through these names. I can get excited because it's a good mix of veterans great champions and some really, really good blue chip prospects along the way. So I like this division, not necessarily as much as the other ones, but this is where I have it.
Yeah, I'm with you. You're not going to see a lot of argument from me. You're the guy that does this week to week. I'm more interested in where you're ranking than giving you my 2 cents. So far, I'm right in line with you. I hate the divisions that you hate, and where you're at, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about it.
So I went a little bit crazy. So I still have, again, what is it? Flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight. I think the lighter weight classes, they're more dynamic, but they really are starting to get soaked up with talent. And I had to put flyweight at 4. I had them at 2 and I moved them. And when I look at flyweight, it is a great division. Obviously, the Figueiredo Moreno thing, it kind of clouds it because we've had 3 fights so far, and now Moreno's switching camps. But when I look at it, Askar Askarov's got a fight against Kai Kara-France. That's great. Pantoja's hanging around. Nicolau, Kopp, Garbrandt, wherever he fits into it. And then when you focus outside of the UFC, there's still really good talent. Azamat Karafov over with ACA. He's 15-0. Ali Bagwatinov, who was one of those guys just like Kyoji Horiguchi. Like, what are we doing here? Why are they outside of the UFC? Brandon Royval, Tim Elliott, the dirty, dirty cheater that he is. And then when we really get into the weeds, with one championship, it was funny. We talked about this. What was it? It was a couple of weeks ago. Victor Altamirano had a fight against Carlos Hernandez. And we were like, hey, if you look at these guys in the regional fights, one of them fought Jared Brooks, like right after he's in the UFC. And then everybody in the comment section, collectively, John, I'm not even lying. This is how excited I am. They were like, Jared Brooks could be a top 5 UFC flyweight right now. Like, that's how good of a fighter he was. The UFC just gave up on him. So I continue to go through this. David Dvorak, Joshua Pacio over with one championship. Ali Askov over with Brave. Carlos Enrique with ACA. Imran Bukayev over with ACA. Like, there's that much talent on a global scale. Flyweight's a great division, but even with the UFC, as thin as it might seem, it's filling up, and globally, it's a great division.
Okay, we move on.
All right, so the next one, we're looking at featherweight. Featherweight, obviously, with Holloway, with Volkanovski, who's such a dominant champ. But again, AJ McKee, Brian Ortega, and I don't know if you read about the stuff that he kind of posted here recently about getting stuck in Mexico. It's kind of some scary stuff. Calvin Kattar, Josh Emmett, Patricio Pitbull, Korean Zombie's got a big title fight coming up. Yair Rodriguez, super, super dynamic division, and it just continues on. It continues on. Haibulaev, my guy with PFL. It's a great division. I don't have to explain myself, I don't think, with featherweight. But then when you look at number 2 and you look at number 1, lightweight's been such a good division for so long, but bantamweight's on the rise. Bantamweight's my number 1. Lightweight's my number 2. I mean, with lightweight, you've got Oliveira. You've got a lot of fun fighters. It's hard to knock on the door, but bantamweight's even more difficult. And you look at some of the fights that have just recently been made, and I was going to kind of save this for the end, but we like to kind of just peruse Marcel Dorf's Instagram at the fight announcements. But Marlon Vera's fighting Rob Font. Marlon Moraes just fought Song Yadong. Like, Song Yadong is on the come up. Yadong is here. Yadong is there. Yadong's everywhere. But when I do look at it for bantamweight, I mean, it is such a good division. And with featherweight too, you could consider that number 1, like I said, with the AJ McKees and the Volkanovskis. But Aldo, Piotr Jan, Dillashaw, Sandhagen, Font, Dvalishvili, Sergio Pettis over with Bellator, Enrique Barzonet over there too, Adriano Moraes over with one championship. It is such a fun division, and there's so many names. Like, even on Fight Matrix, I'm down to like 23. Juan Archuleta, Ralph Van Stotts, Timur Valiev. Like, there's so much talent there, and globally, it's such a good division. Bantamweight's my number 1.
Yeah, I mean, you really got to kind of take your hat off to lightweight too. I mean, they lose their champion. They're like one in a forever champion. I mean, this guy's in the GOAT talk, and then they still stay ranked that high with you. So, I mean, that's impressive that they were that deep that they could lose their champ and still be ranked high.
The only thing that, like when I look at bantamweight and I go, let's go 20 to 25 really quick. Umar Nurmagomedov, Ray Borg, who's doing it with Eagle FC, Sean O'Malley, Juan Archuleta, Ralph Van Stotts, Timur Valiev. And then I look at lightweight, 20 down. Renato Carneiro. Okay, so Moicano. We have Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Roberto De Souza over with Ryzen, Natan Schultz, Clay Collard, Anthony Pettis. I get a lot more excited about 20 to 25 with bantamweight than I do with 20 to 25 at lightweight.
What else we got? Anything for the ladies?
So that's what I got there. And then when I look at the women's divisions, I've got atomweight, then featherweight, then bantamweight, then strawweight, and then flyweight. And I know that's controversial. I know it is because strawweight, it's the best women's division. But when I look at flyweight, I like to shake it up a little bit. And when you do consider what's going on in the women's flyweight division right now, you are starting to see out with the old, in with the new. Manon Fiorot is the hotness. Caitlin Chukagian, for some reason, had a fight book today that just made me kind of scratch my head and wonder, again, what are we doing here? But Tyler Santos, new blood, getting an opportunity for the title. And then you go down through it. Juliana Velasquez is your champ over with Bellator. Casey O'Neill, Alexa Grasso's got a fight with Joanne Wood. Marina Moroz just had a great fight. Aaron Blanchfield's a blue chip prospect. And I continue to go down through it. Zhang Jinnan over with one championship. Tracy Cortez, Macy Barber, Karine Silva, who's got a fight coming up against Poliana Botelho. And then, like, even below that, Miranda Maverick, De La Rosa, and Sijara Eubanks. I can get more excited about that than strawweight because for me, it just feels like the top of the women's strawweight division. It's just, we're recycling names at this point. So there's not as many up and coming fighters. It's a lot of fighters that you already know putting on really good fights, but I think flyweight's where it's at when it comes to the prospects and the more exciting matchups that I've seen recently.
All right, there you have it. Let's move on to the socials. Let's start with For the Gram. Also, on when Dana White was on the Impulsive podcast, Logan Paul said, Dana, me in the octagon, what say you? And Dana said, not no. What do you think? Do you think we're ever going to see Logan Paul in the octagon?
They made Albert Duraev go on Dana White's Contender Series. He was already an established champion. They made him do that.
How many followers does Albert Duraev have?
I don't know. That's a tough nut to crack of a question. But
yeah,
when you look at Logan Paul, again, like CM Punk and Mike Jackson was a real fight that happened in MMA. And it was it the worst fight you've ever seen? Like, again, Ngannou, Derek Lewis is pretty bad. But, like, in terms of technique, that one was not a great fight. So, the question that I have would be, who the hell do you match Logan Paul up with? Because I think even, like, a guy like Mickey Gall would beat him.
Isn't Logan bigger than Jake?
I think.
I feel like he's taller. He weighs more.
Is he like 195? Somewhere around
Jake
there?
Was 195. We'll look into it. But yeah, I mean, they're big guys. So now it's like, it gets weird because you're putting him in there with bigger guys. And, you know, and you never know with these things. Listen, it came out recently that I saw, maybe it came out a long time ago. I saw James Toney said that he had a gentleman's agreement with Randy Couture to just throw hands.
That's fucking illegal.
Yeah.
Like so, Seth Petrozelli?
Yeah, exactly. So, yay or nay, you think it's going to happen or not?
No, I don't.
Okay. We move on to one Twitter hitter. Craig, let's talk MMA history, which may be what we're going to do with one Twitter hitter from now on. 9 years ago, George St. Pierre fought Nick Diaz. And 3 years ago, Jorge Masvidal knocked out Darren Till this week. What was the more important moment in MMA history?
Wouldn't you say it was a pay-per-view main event?
You'd think, but at the end of that fight, everything was what it was. Now, there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is this was the beginning of the career resurgence of Jorge Masvidal. The other school of thought would be that the career resurgence of Jorge Masvidal began after he knocked out Ben Askren. So, because after he beat Till, he just beat Till. He just knocked him out. He could have knocked him out and nothing happened. Once he beat Askren, he became a star.
That's it to me. I mean, I look at it. You beat Askren, you beat Till, and then you beat Nate Diaz. Like, I would say the Askren moment's the one that, you know, sells the NFT. But when it comes to Diaz and it comes to GSP, and I mean, listen, I got George right behind me. He would agree that it's got to be that one. And at the time, that was a huge fight. And now you're just going to have recency bias, right? Like 9 years versus 3. So I'm going to go with GSP, but it's a tough one. I'd like to know what people are thinking on that one.
I'd like to know what people are thinking on that one too, but I'm going to ask you the question a little crazier because you may have just unlocked something that is interesting. NFTs. Would a GSP Nick Diaz just stare down, or the fight poster as an NFT be more valuable than Jorge Masvidal knocking out Darren Till? I think it would. So
yeah.
So you're right. I think the GSP Nick Diaz fight was a bigger moment. All right, post it to the book. You're gonna have to put me on game here because I don't know if my head's been in the clouds or up my ass, but I don't know Nam fan CTE video. Explain it to me, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
There was a video that came out on Reddit, and I saw it yesterday, that Nam fan had posted to his YouTube channel, and it was about breaking up a fight between a couple of kids at his gym, and then he explained it. And then everybody in the comments section were thinking, Nam fan, he's got to get some help. He doesn't sound like he used to sound. And it was a little bit scary. And then if you go back through Nam fan, some of his recent videos, he had a video come out that said he had a boxing fight that was booked, but it fell out and he was really looking forward to it. But unfortunately, the opponent couldn't get to it. And it just didn't sound like the old Nam fan. And obviously, you kind of do the internet sleuth and you watch some of the Nam fan post-fight interviews that he had when he was still in the UFC. Because you got to consider, he had some, his fights might have gone to decision in the UFC, a lot of them. But he had some really, really wild fights. And he was definitely a fan favorite. And yeah, he might have fallen off from the perspective of Nam fan being in the mainstream. But it's just one of those things where you look at that. You look at fighter pay, you look at the way that, fighters are taken care of after they're done fighting, especially in some of these major organizations. And it just makes you kind of scratch your head. And if Nam fan happens to suffer from any issues cognitively, it really does suck to see that in the mainstream. And obviously, I've got a picture here somewhere right behind me. I've got Gary Goodrich. And it's sad to kind of listen to Gary talk about the problems that he's had since fighting pro and MMA. So hopefully, this doesn't just become a blip on the radar and it's not just a conversation that happens on Reddit or Facebook or wherever. And if Nam fan actually does have some issues, somebody can step in and give him a hand, because we saw that. What was it? The Spencer Fisher piece that came out with MMA fighting that really started a giant discussion on this. But I just wonder if behind the scenes it's made a dent, made any changes.
Well, I guess what is it going to take for people to care about this stuff? Because, the sport's so young and, Dana's been dropping the same numbers forever. Well, the numbers are getting bigger. I mean, if you say, it seems like only yesterday we were celebrating 25 years. 93 to 2021 we've been in this thing for a minute. So I guess what I'm saying is, how bad does it have to be before we get involved? Do we need it to be like football players killing themselves? Do we need to be like pro wrestlers killing themselves and killing their families? Do we need guys to suffer? At what point do we either, at the very least, okay, you don't want to pay fighters more, well then let's have a fund for retired fighters. Let's have, let's make the UFC PI a place that can be like a veterans hospital in a way for military people, where fighters go and they get the state of the art. I mean, if you already have the state of the art shit for your active fighters, just extend it to your retired fighters and just say, okay, this is a shitty way of looking at it, but just say, okay, if you were a fighter for X number of fights for X number of years in the UFC, no matter what other promotion you've ever fought for, if you fought for us this number of years, we give you a card. The card gets you in to the UFC PI and it exposes you to X, Y, and Z. Now, listen, there is a danger in that, because now it turns into a place with waiting rooms and all kinds of shit potentially. But at the same time, I mean, is that worse than these guys really going into some dark spaces? So I think it's time to address this in a big way. All right, Craig, we move on to start the conversation. I don't know if we touched on this before we talked, but because I know that it happened since we talked. BKFC getting bought or joining forces, however you want to phrase it or look at it, with Triller. I'm going to be honest with you. It kind of seems like a match made in heaven. Am I missing something here, or is this genius on both parts?
It's kind of weird, and so let's go back a month. Remember when JDS was supposed to fight Kubrat Pulev with Triller? I do. Because Kubrat Pulev fought Frank Mir, and Dan Miragliotta let the fight go way too long, in my opinion. So I was not eager, but I was watching from afar to see that fight happen. Then it didn't happen. Now JDS is going to fight Jorgen de Castro with Eagle FC. You know I'm going to watch that, and I'm not even joking. I actually like watching those fights. I think they do a pretty good job. I don't necessarily love the commentary team of Chael Sonnen, Kamaru Usman, Henry Cejudo, and Cyrus Fees. I think Fees does a good job. I think Chael does a good job. I think Kamaru was all right, and I think Henry's bad. He's very bad. He mispronounces a lot of things. He interviews the losing fighter before the winning fighter. He does weird stuff. When it comes to BKFC, though, I feel like they're at a weird spot with their roster. And I feel like joining forces with Triller and kind of having that infusion of money will help out. Because consider, like, Thiago Silva and Hector Lombard just got signed by Eagle FC. So now they're going to be training more so for MMA than they would for bare knuckle. I don't know what, like, maybe you can have a transferable contract where you can fight with BKFC and you can still fight with Eagle FC and you can do boxing, you can do MMA, you can do everything. But JDS, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Hector Lombard in 2021, 2022 are big names under the Triller or BKFC banners. So hopefully that Triller move will help them out. The one thing I want to see is when it goes with Triller, are they going to be able to secure different venues? Is it going to go from being, Biloxi, Mississippi to now, or somewhere in Florida to now, like we're fighting at MSG, or we're fighting, I don't know, in some open stadium in Texas, and Metallica plays us in, like Triller's been able to do in the past. So I am eager to see what they're able to do. I think public perception on David Feldman has really changed a lot, because he went from the guy that said, like, our guys are in here to fight, you weren't there to fight, so I'm gonna pull your purse, so to speak, and I paraphrase, to now a guy that, like, again, a lot of people seem to have really gotten behind him. And BKFC, for me, again, I'm still not a big fan of bare knuckle boxing. It's not something that interests me, but it's continued to grow. And, you and I have talked about it before. We thought Artem Lobov and Paulie Malignaggi was the biggest fight BKFC was going to ever have, but they just keep coming back. So I'm looking forward to this in an odd way. I'm looking forward to see what happens.
I think that they both help something the other struggles with, which is, I don't think that there is any, and I don't know if this is why this move was made, but they do kind of feel like they're running so close together that it could be. I don't think that there was really a lot of recognition with that triad combat thing Triller was trying to do, and I don't think anybody really cared about it. And I think that in lieu of doing that, if you make BKFC the division of Triller that does MMA or bare knuckle fights, and you could somehow take their brand recognition and transfer it over to what you're trying to do in a non-boxing capacity, it makes a lot of sense. I do think that, and I think that joining forces with Triller kind of gets BKFC out of being pigeonholed into fighting only bare knuckle fights. Now you're with Triller, you can maybe put some gloves on, and you're not stuck with BKFC, because that was, so you can still do bare knuckle fights if you want to, but you can still sort of branch out and bring in some people that maybe you couldn't. It seems like BKFC has an infrastructure that Triller would like instead of triad combat, and Triller has an ability to get musical acts, has an ability to sign people, is infusing money. So it does seem like it's a very symbiotic relationship in that they're both bringing things to the table the other needs, but not the same thing.
Do you think, going forward with this, is it just going to, because to me, I look at it and I think, okay, now you have all this money. We're going to go out and sign former boxers, former big name MMA fighters. Do you think we're ever going to get to a period of time here in the next 5 to 10 years where you have like an actual, like, I know Sam Shoemaker's one of them, but really like late in his career, do you think we're ever going to have like a homegrown bare knuckle star?
A homegrown bare knuckles. That's interesting.
Like Yuli Diaz, he's kind of one.
I think that someone will be smart enough to realize if they go the bare knuckle path at a young age, that they will be unique in that and there might be something to that. They might be able to monetize that. Whereas I could fight, if I get a couple of fights under my belt and I'm 5-0, I could get a high-profile fight faster in bare knuckle than I could in the UFC or Bellator. Or so somebody might be smart enough to figure that out. But I don't know that BKFC will be growing fighters necessarily. So that's kind of how I look at it. Yeah. All right, Craig, let's move on to finish strong. I don't have a lot. I do want to bring this up.
Okay.
This whole Darren Till, Khamzat Chimaev, first of all, their bromance.
It's weird now.
And them extending an invitation to Conor McGregor to join it, I got to be honest, I don't hate it. I don't think it would be the worst move for Conor, who typically does not make himself, he's not a shticky guy, right? He'll do his own thing, and maybe he'll do some shtick here and there, but he typically isn't joined up with a couple other, guys to do grab ass. That's not his game. But I think the byproduct of playing whatever bullshit games these two want to play would be getting two great training partners.
Playing touch butt in the park over in Sweden.
Is that
it's weird. It's
almost
like,
is it worth being their buddies to get them as training partners? Because he can get them to come to SBG.
People will come to a Conor McGregor camp. He'll get whoever he wants. We know this. It's weird, right? Like, Makwan Amirkhani fights Mike Grundy this weekend. Depending on when this episode comes out, he won, he lost. You hear it, you don't. But Makwan doesn't train at SBG anymore, where he had a lot of success. He trains at Loop Martial Arts and MA Academy, which is Makwan Amirkhani Academy. Gunnar Nelson used to train at SBG. It was a pretty big thing, right? He trains at Mjolnir. Like, he trains at home. So I mean, even James Gallagher kind of branched out from SBG and went over to Glory MMA and Fitness. Like, I don't know how, and we're talking about the main SBG because there's it's branched off. It's a franchise type thing now. But when it comes to Conor, I don't know if he would do that. I think he'd want them to come to him. He wouldn't go to them. You know?
I think if Conor's smart, I think the move is you ask them to come to SBG to train with you, and then you appease them by showing them a night on the town in Dublin or doing a training video. Like, you do something that gives them the impression, like you take a picture with the two of them, and if they want to post the three amigos or whatever, then you retweet it and you put "good shit, mate," or something like that. Like, something where it's still you, but you're not denouncing what they said, but you're also not completely co-signing. There's a way to do this and get them as training partners.
So I want to talk fight bookings. Let's let that cat out of the bag. And I already talked about one of them. Your guy, Chito Marlon Veri's fighting Rob Font. But another one that got announced, we didn't even talk about it all episode. Michael Chandler's fighting Tony Ferguson. Do you love it or do you hate it?
I love it. I do. I love it. I think that, they're at similar places in their career. You can argue Chandler's a little closer to a shot than Ferguson is. Ferguson might be, if Chandler's plateauing and Ferguson's on the way down, they're kind of meeting at the same place. I don't know. I think Chandler has Chandler fights left in him. I don't know if Ferguson has Ferguson fights left in him. That's what I can't quite wrap my head around.
Yeah,
but I like the matchup. It's a poster fight, so we'll see if it ends up being a good fight.
Okay, a couple more poster fights. I already kind of mentioned it, but Tyler Santos is going to take on Valentina Shevchenko for the flyweight title and the strawweight title. This was just announced. Rose Namajunas taking on Carla Esparza. Marina Rodriguez just had a wild fight against Yan Xiaonan. It was very, very close. Marina won, but Carla gets that shot. I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask it. Which one are you looking forward to more?
Carla and Rose, because it's a rematch, and it's a rematch of the tough finale. And which Carla won. So that's very interesting, that fight to me.
Marvin Vettori's going to take on Robert Whittaker. You down for that fight?
I am. Yeah, I think that's a good fight.
And one more, because you know what? I'm a weird guy, and let's have a little bit of fun. Pat Sabatini was supposed to fight Gavin Tucker, Canadian. He's now, and Pat Sabatini's 3-0 in the UFC at this point. He's now going to fight TJ Laramie, Canadian, who's 0-1 in the UFC. Why?
I don't know.
Why? Okay, good answer. That's a whole other, can of worms. But I don't understand why the UFC books some of these fights, and this is one of those ones. I have no idea what they're thinking here. It's bad.
And there you have it. We're back. Better than ever. Craig can be followed at Craig Allen FNP. I can be followed at SM Cornerman. The fight has been stopped. We'll see you next week. For old time's sake, Craig, say something witty.
I have a fire starter on my lap.
Be one of those guys. Be one of those guys on social media that burns a jersey. All right, we'll see you next week. Peace.